have our soffit around the eaves. The next thing that we need to do is box that soffit out under the eaves so that moisture, animals, bugs can't get in through this exposed area. To accomplish that, there's actually a few different tricks that you can use in Revit. You can use a regular Revit family, or you can model a wall there in place. But I really don't recommend either one of those tactics because they're both solutions that aren't very adaptable. One of the things that I like to do, though, is use walls because walls are fairly easy to modify. They can have the right material associated with them. And then if the roof or the soffit would make any adjustments, the walls can follow them along. So let's go through the process of creating a wall type that we can use, as well as drawing those walls into place. Underneath the Architecture tab, we can select on the picture of the wall. Then underneath Properties, here on the Type Selector list, let's scroll down until we can find a generic 5-inch wall. Now we'll duplicate this generic 5-inch wall and make the kind of wall that we need to create the box underneath the eave. Click on Edit Type. Let's select the Duplicate button to give it a new name, and let's just call it Soffit Box. And click on OK. Maybe not the best name for it, but it serves what the purpose of this wall will be. Next to the word structure, there's an option for Edit. Click on Edit. And for the thickness of the wall, let's just make it 1 inch thick. For the material, right now it says by category. Click where it has by category and click on the little box with the 3 dots in it to the right. This will open up the material browser. Then in the material browser, select metal, paint finish, ivory matte. This will match up with many of the other materials that are around the roof, and it will also display appropriately in renderings or if we take a section. Click on OK, and click on OK one more time. In the Type Properties dialog box, click on OK. Now under Properties, we can see that we have a basic wall soffit box. And now we need to go to a floor plan view to draw in our walls. Underneath the project browser and floor plans, go to the top plan. Then let's zoom in. One of the things that we can see when we start to zoom into one of the corners of our building is that we can see our roof and it's partially cut through. But we also can see that we have the roof material. And unfortunately, the roof material is making it very difficult for us to see where the soffit should be located at. But we can't hide the roof because then we won't know where to draw our walls at. So what we need to do is just hide this roof material. Now we can either do that through the visibility graphics or by just clicking on the roof, right-clicking, going to Override Graphics and View, and by Element. If we select on Surface Pattern and then clear the checkbox next to Visible, it will shut the visibility of the surface pattern of that material off. If we click on OK, we can now see that the visibility of that material has been shut off just in this view. Now the next step that we need to do is actually draw that wall in. So let's zoom in. You can see that we have the roof tool actually activated. So let's go to the Architecture tab and then click on the picture of the wall. Make sure that the basic wall soffit box is in the Type Selector list. For the base constraints, let's set a base offset of -1 foot. This means it'll be 1 foot down from top, which happens to be at the same location as our soffit. For the overall height, let's make sure that the height is actually coming up above our roof, at least for the most part. So let's have a height that's unconnected of 2 feet. For the location line, we'll do the finished face of exterior. Click where we can see one of the lines for the soffit. Go over to the left. Go to the far outside edge of the roof. Click. Come up. Then let's go out to the outside edge of the roof. And then click again. Then we can escape a couple of times on the keyboard to get out of that portion of the wall drawing command. The next thing we need to do is draw in the same types of walls on each of the other 3 corners of this main roof. So once again, under the Architecture tab, select on the picture of the wall, Properties, Type Selector list, make sure it's soffit box, make sure we still have the height in 2 foot, the base offset still needs to be -1 foot. Zoom into the right-hand side, click, move over. If you need to hit the space bar in order to flip the wall to the other side, you can. Go out to the far outside edge, click, come up, draw to the outside edge, then hit escape to get out of the command. And repeat that process on the other two corners. Once you have those walls in place, we need to do the same thing here at the front of the building. So once again, come up to the wall command, come in, place our walls, go to the outside edges of the roof. In this case, I really need to bring it down a little bit more. So I'll select on the wall, use the move command. Make sure this wall goes to the outside edge. And do the same thing on the other side. When that's complete, we take a look at it in a 3D view by selecting on the default 3D view icon. And once we zoom out, we can see that we have our walls here on the corners. And now our next step will be to go through the cleanup tools in order to clean up our walls there at the corner of our soffit box. Once we've created our new walls and then drawn them around the outside edge of the soffit underneath the eaves, the next step is to clean up those walls to the underneath side of our roof. To do that, we're best served to be inside of an elevation view. So what I'd like to do is click on the right-hand side of the view cube. Let's place vents on the gabled ends of our home. Now, there's really a couple of different ways we can do this. I've seen people in the past use windows and then customize them to look like a gable vent. Or the way that I preferred is to just have a wall-hosted Revit family, which happens to be called a gable vent. And that's what we'll place here in the model. We need to place 3 of them, each at the top of the gables, and we can find those gable vents underneath architecture and then selecting on the picture above component. In the type selector list under properties, look for the gable vent 8-inch pitch. Then let's start by placing one of those gable vents over on this side of the house. I'd really like to spin this around so we can see the underneath side of the roof. So select on the right hand side of the view cube to spin the model around. Then zoom in by just spinning the wheel of your mouse. And let's place this vent right here at the peak. So you'll only be able to get it pretty close if you try to use move. In fact, if I did move again, I could click there now, then try to zoom in a little bit farther and try to move it up. But the reason why I can't move it directly to this point is because constrain is checkmarked. If we click the check mark next to constrain, we can now move it up to the corner and get it to an appropriate location. Let's try the same thing over on the other side of the building. So in order to spin the building around, I'm just going to click on but to place the vents on the wall. Now before what I did was just use the move command, but I do want to point out that there is the nudge command that we can use as well. And the nudge command is by using the arrows on your keyboard. So if you select the vent and then use the arrows on your keyboard, such as the up arrow or the left or right arrows, you can then nudge that vent into position. And I'll click off of that and zoom back, and now we can see that that vent is along the wall there at the end. Next, let's move around to the front of our building. This roof. The reality of it is that this roof is a 5/12 pitch, and this was designed for an 8/12. So we need to make a change to this gable louver family so that it has the right pitch associated with its sides. So let's select on the Gable vent 8-inch pitch that's right here on our model, and then come up to Edit Type. Here we can see that it has a pitch and a height associated with it. Well, I know that this front roof is a 5/12 pitch. So let's duplicate this gable vent. It looks like this vent is fairly small in relationship to the roof. I kind of like it that way. But on the front, it looks like it's a little bit oversized. So I want to make it a little bit shorter. So let's select back on the vents, come up here to the Edit Type, and for the height, I'm going to change the height to be 1'6" and click on OK. This is about the scale that I really want it to be at. So now I'm just going to use the arrow keys on my keyboard, the nudge command, in order to move the vent back up and underneath the eave. I'll zoom in just a little bit tighter. Once I get it to about the location where I'd like it to be at, I'll zoom back out, spin it around one last time just to take a look at it. If it needs to move up or over to the side a little bit more, even in a 3D view, I can use that nudge tool in order to move it into position. And after doing that, we now have our gable end vents in place. Let's load in some kitchen cabinets and appliances. We can find those by either going to the Architecture tab, then selecting on Component, then selecting Place Component, and then clicking Load Family, and we can pick the appropriate one off of the list. What I like to do is select on the 30 by 32 left-hand refrigerator. Then zoom into our kitchen area. We can see that this is the refrigerator, and I just want to put the refrigerator about in this corner and about this location. Now the exact location doesn't matter as long as it's close to the walls. It can either be right up against the walls like I have it or just off the wall. I'll leave that up to you. Once you get that refrigerator in the right location, click to place the refrigerator in. Now before we put our range in the range, select on the 30-inch by 26-inch, hit the space bar to rotate it around, and then place the range in this location. We need to place yet another cabinet in this area. So come up here to Properties, click where we have Range, scroll back up to our base cabinets. At the 2 drawer, let's select this 48-inch. Hit the space bar a few times to rotate it around, and then place that 48-inch cabinet right there beside the range, and click for final placement. Now just move this so that it's right up against the edge of the range. So I'll select on Move. I may zoom in just by spinning the wheel of my mouse. I'll click on the intersection here and then move it over so it's very close to the edge of this range. If you don't get it quite to the right location, you can always click the arrow keys on the keyboard, either left or right, to move that to the correct location. And if we zoom back out again, we can now see that we have our base cabinets loaded in. One last thing that I'd like to do is to move this window over so that it's centered over this cabinet area. This is where the sink will eventually be. So select on the window, then use those arrow keys on your keyboard to just nudge that window over until it's centered right here where that cabinet is located at. Click over here and then zoom back out again in order to see the cabinets and the appliances in your new kitchen area. To place countertops in our kitchen area, we first need to zoom into the kitchen area by just moving our cursor up to the kitchen and then spinning the wheel of the mouse. We need to place two different kinds of countertops here within our project. One will have a hole for the sink, which will be located in this area. And then the second countertop won't have any holes in it at all. In fact, there'll be two countertops, one on each side of our range. To load in those countertops, we need to go to the Architecture tab, select on Component, click Place a Component, then select Load Family. From the Load Family dialog box, go to Casework, then go to Countertops. In this area where we have our list of different kinds of countertops that we can load into our project, select Countertop with Sinkhole, hold down the Control key, and then select Countertop. Select on the countertop, click where we have the arrows at the end, and then pull the end of that countertop down until it touches the wall, and then just click off of it. Now we have that countertop in this location, and the hole for the sink is currently sitting right here. Now that's not really where we want the hole for the sink. We want the hole for the sink to be lined up with where our window location is at. So if we select on the countertop, we can then click on the double arrows, pull it down so it's even with the sink, do the same thing down here on the other end, pull it down so it's even with the sink. Now one thing to know is when you do that, it then place one countertop in this location, right up against the edge of the wall, then place another countertop, once again against the edge of the wall, over here. At this point, hit the escape key a couple of times, select on the end of one of the countertops, pull it back, then select on the end of the other countertop and do the same thing. Pull it back so that it's right over the top of the casework. To see our countertops, the next thing we can do is place a camera that's looking in this direction inside of our kitchen. Now, it's always good to do this because sometimes your countertops are a little bit high or a little bit low compared to the casework they're supposed to be over the top of. So to see this, let's go to the View tab, select on the 3D view, and then click Camera. Click in this location, and then make sure this cone goes all the way across, and then click when you're just on the other side of the wall. When we do, we can now see that we're looking inside of our kitchen. We can see all the upper cabinets that we put into place, and we can also see that we have our countertops in. Now, if we need to make any adjustments to the countertops, such as moving them forward or back, or side to side, on either side, you can always go back to your floor plan view. Zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. Then the next thing to do would be, if you have these nice dark lines, come up here to View, and then select on Thin Lines. This means that we no longer have the really thick dark lines, and instead, we can now see where the real edge of the countertop is at. Like in this case, I can see that my countertop is actually pulled away from the wall a little bit. So you can select the countertop, come back up here to the Move command, and then start to move your countertop into better locations. And that's what I'm going to do on each side, is make sure that my countertop's in the right spot. Select, click again in order to move them into place. Make sure that it's in the correct spot over here. In this case, it actually looks like my countertop is going into the wall. So I'll need to select on Move. In this case, because it's going into the wall, I can't select on that piece of countertop. So to correct that, I'll come down to our Visual Styles and click on Wireframe. To create a complete bathroom, we first need to zoom into the area where the bathroom is located at. Move your cursor over to the left-hand side of the building and then spin the wheel of your mouse. Once you're in this location, we'll now put in a bathtub, a toilet, and a sink in this area, and then we'll repeat the process over here in the master bathroom area. So let's zoom into the left-hand side of the building by spinning the wheel of the mouse, come up to Architecture, then select on Component. Then click Place a Component. The first thing we want to place is a bathtub. So on the Type Selector list, click, and then scroll down until you find Tub Rectangular 3D. Click on the Tub Rectangular 3D, touch on this wall here on the outside edge of the bathroom, and then click to place the tub in. Now, when you place that tub in, it will probably be flipped in the wrong direction, meaning that the water, instead of coming from here into the bathtub, should be coming from here into the bathtub. It's the same as a toilet. Select on Toilet Domestic 3D, click on Open. You may need to hit the space bar to rotate that toilet around, and then place the toilet up against the wall in about this location. You can escape a couple times on the keyboard to get out of placement on the toilet, and then come back up again to the Architecture command, select on Component, Place Component, and the next thing we need to place is the casework for underneath our sink. So click here in the Type Selector list, and let's look for Base Cabinet. And we want to have the Base Cabinet Double Door Sink Unit, and select on 36-inch. Once again, you may need to hit the space bar to rotate it around, and we'd like to place that in this location. Once it's put into place, we'll escape a couple times on the keyboard, and now I'd like to place the sink. To place the sink, we'll come up here to the Architecture tab, come over here to Component, we'll place a component. I don't believe that we actually have the kind of sink that I'd like, so we need to load that family in as well. So we'll come up here to Load Family, go down to Plumbing, double click on Plumbing, then go to Architectural, Fixtures, double click on Sinks, and now I'd like to put in just some sort of vanity sink. So let's pick the Sink Vanity Square and click on Open. When you see it here inside of your drawing area, you'll hit Space a couple times on the keyboard to rotate it around, and then place it right here in the middle of your casework. The next thing we'll need to do is load in some countertop. So we'll hit Escape a couple of times, come up to Architecture, select on Component, place a component, and now I actually know that the countertop is already part of this project, so that's the next thing that we need to do is start to look for where our countertop is located at. And we may need to scroll either up or down on the list until we can find our countertop. And we want to pick a countertop that has a sink hole in it. So select the 24-inch depth underneath with sink hole. You'll need to hit the space bar to rotate that countertop around. Then place the countertop in this location. And then click for placement. The next thing that we'll need to do is to adjust where the hole and our countertops in the right spot. So now we have this all put together. Now the next thing I'd like to do is make sure that the sink is at the right elevation. To do that, we'll just cut a section through here and take a look at it. We'll come up here to the View tab and create a new section cut. Click once, click over here with the section highlighted, right click, then go to View. We'll zoom in by just spinning the wheel of the mouse and make sure that the sink itself has the right elevation. Right now it looks like the sink is a little bit low and it looks like the countertop is just a little bit high. So we'll need to make adjustments to both of them. What I'd like to do now is select on the countertop, give this an offset value. Let's start with -1 inch, see if it drops down far enough. I kind of like where that's at, so we'll just leave that at -1 inch. Next, we'll select on the sink over here for the offset value. Let's try 5 inches and see what happens. If we did a positive number, it raises the sink. If we do a negative number, it lowers the sink. So make sure that this is a positive 5 inch. Move your cursor over. Right now it looks like it's not quite at the right elevation. So I can continue to adjust this if I wanted to. Or another option that we have is to select on the sink, come up here to the Align command, click where we would like to align it to, which is this line going across the top, and click the bottom edge of the sink in order to align it to the correct location. And now we have the sink, we have the casework as well as our plumbing inside of this space. Now we need to repeat this task over in the other restroom area. But the easiest way to accomplish that would be actually to just copy all of this over to that location. To do that, what I'd like to do is go back to this first floor plan view, then window around each of these things. So I'm just going to click right here, hold my mouse button down, window around everything inside of here. Then come up here to my filter to filter out anything extra, such as any doors or anything along those lines. In this case, we'll just clear a checkbox next to doors or walls. In fact, if you see anything that's not casework or plumbing fixtures, you should clear the checkbox next to them. Click on OK to that, and now we can see that all those things are highlighted. From here, we can create a copy of it. Basically, just need to spin this around so it's on the other wall, looking at the other side. To do that, we'll select back on this bathtub area, and what we need to do is pick a new host for the bathtub, because right now it needs a wall to be placed against. If you click on Pick New Host, we can then pick this wall over here on the side, and you click to drop it in. The rest of this does not require a host, so what I'd like to do is click window around these objects, let go of the mouse button, then use the rotate command to rotate them. So I'll make sure that this was right here in the middle, and then for the angle, type in 180. This will spin them around 180 degrees. And now we can use the move command, click the intersection of these, and then move these into position. If the toilet needs to be moved at all at this point, you could click on it, move it. If it needed to be flipped, you could always use the flip arrows to flip it. And as is, I like the bathtub to be just the way that it is, and all the fixtures to be in the locations that they're currently at. To add room tags to our spaces, we need to drop in rooms. And the reason behind this is that there has to be something for the room tag to actually tag. Room tags by themselves don't contain any information. They just report the room number as well as the room name of that room that they're tagging. So to place rooms into our project, we need to go to the Architecture tab, then select on Room. Then we can zoom in so that we can see our spaces. And what I'd like to do now is start to drop in rooms going all the way around our building. We'll move our cursor over into this area and then click once in order to drop a room there. Let's place a second room in this location. I'd like to have yet another room for this walk-in closet area. Another room for this closet. This will be a room. Another room here. Now technically this room is trying to come out into this area, and it may complain when we click, and that's okay, we'll just click anyway. This is that complaint, that warning message that it's giving us. We'll click on OK to that. We'll place another room over here. I'll place a room there. Another room inside of this area. A room here. And then finally, a room in that area. And we also need to have a room over here in our garage area. So I'll click for that final placement. Next, I'll hit escape a few times on the keyboard, and we can see that we now have room tags in each one of these areas. But they still need to be named whatever it is that they need to be named. So to accomplish that, we'll come over here where it has the room 1. We'll click and then click again on the word room. When it highlights like this, what I'd like to do this will be a bathroom or just bath. I'll call this util for utility. Next room will be kitchen. Technically, I could call it kitchen dining, but it'll just be called kitchen. We have a closet, which I'll abbreviate closet. This will be another bedroom. In fact, I'll just name this bedroom 2. This will be a bathroom. This will be bedroom 3. Another closet. I'll click out here. And now we have each of our rooms with actual room objects inside of them, as well as each one of them being labeled. Now the final thing that I'd like to do is separate the kitchen area from the family room area because they currently take up the same spot. That marks where our kitchen area is located at because it's separated by that room separator line from this room, which if we move our mouse around inside of here, we'll find another X and see the areas that the family room now contains. To draw a ceiling in, we first need to be inside of a ceiling plane view, also called a reflected ceiling plane view. A ceiling plane view means that we're looking up toward the ceiling as opposed to down toward the floor. So under the project browser, find Ceiling Plans, click the little plus next to Ceiling Plans, and then double click on First Floor to open up the first floor ceiling plan. Then zoom in by spinning the wheel of the mouse, and here we can see all of our interior walls, and we're looking up toward the roof. And each of these spaces will now be automatically placing our ceiling into each one of these areas. So it's automatically placing the ceiling wherever it can find walls. But the other option that we have is to sketch the ceiling. If we select on Sketch Ceiling, we can then draw in the boundary for that ceiling. For instance, if instead of just placing the ceiling inside of the walls like we did over here, we wanted the ceiling to go over the top of all the walls, we can do that. All we need to do is draw in the outer boundary for that ceiling. To create a vaulted ceiling, I typically use 2 ceilings, one for one slope and the other for the second slope. To create that vaulted ceiling, we'll zoom into the area where we want the vaulted ceilings. And what I'd like to have is a vaulted ceiling that goes from this wall up to this green dash line. Then a second vault that goes from here up to the green dash line. So they'll both be sloping up to the location of the green dash line. To draw in the vaulted ceiling, we need to go to the Architecture tab, then select on Ceiling. For which type of ceiling that we want to use the GWB ceiling, which is a gypsum wallboard ceiling. And we'll sketch in the outside of where the ceiling needs to be located at. So we'll select on Sketch Ceiling. Make sure that line is selected. And now the first thing I'd like to do is just draw around the perimeter of this area. So on the inside of this wall here, I'll click once, come over, click, come up to here, click, at this location. Once that's done, I'll hit escape a couple times. Select on slope arrow, we pick this point, and then draw the arrow in this direction until it hits this other wall, and then click again. Once you've done that, the slope arrow will be highlighted. If not, just click on it to highlight it. The tail is this end, the head is where the arrow is located at. So for the height offset at tail, I'd like this to be 0. This means that this end will be at the same height as the ceiling, which in this case I believe was an 8-foot tall ceiling. For the level at head, that can be default, and then the height offset at head, I'll make that be 1 foot, meaning that this part will be 1 foot higher than this part. And if we click the big green check mark, it'll now place that ceiling in, with this ceiling being 1 foot higher at this point than it is down here at this point. Now we need to do the reverse over here. Draw the ceiling here, and the slope arrow come from this point up, and then specify a 1 foot difference on either end of the slope arrow. So we'll come back up here to the Architecture tab, select on Ceiling, make sure it's still that GWB compound ceiling. We'll sketch the ceiling in. Make sure we have line selected. Click right there. Come straight down until we click where that green dashed line is at. Next, I'll come over. And instead of going all the way on over, which I could do if I wanted to, I'll just come over to this point. Come straight up this wall. Click. Come back across again. And now that we have this rectangular shape in, we'll use a slope arrow. Click at this location. Come over. Click again. Now the exact spot of the slope arrow doesn't matter, as long as it's touching this line and then touching this line, and it's going in a straight line. If the slope arrow is at any kind of angle, come straight down, click again. So that we don't see all the way through to the other end of the building, we'll click on these little arrows down here at the end of the section, pull it back. Then with the section symbol highlighted, we'll right click, go to View. And now we can see that we have the ceiling vaulted up to this location. By the way, if you ever wanted to bring these walls up to meet the ceiling, you could do that too. Just select on one of the walls, come up here to attach top base, select on the ceiling up above, and the wall will then raise up to touch that ceiling. And you can do the same thing on the other side. Select on the wall, attach top base. Make sure the top is selected, because if base is selected, it'll try to put the bottom of the wall up here and it'll give you an error message. Then select on the ceiling to raise it up to touch that vaulted ceiling.